Israel Update with Gadi Taub and Mike Duran.
Hello and welcome to Israel Updates. It is now February 9th, 2025. It's a Friday. It has been 1 year, 4 months, and 1 day since October 7th of 2023. I'm Gadi Taub here in Washington, D.C., and Mike is, well, I can't say waiting because we pre-recorded this. We pre-recorded a session in Hudson, so before passing along the baton to our pre-recorded session, I'll just say that we are still as sane as possible under the circumstances.
Hi, I'm Mike Duran. I am a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, where I'm also the director for the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East. And I am joined this afternoon by Professor Gadi Taub. Hello, Gadi. Surprisingly. Gadi teaches at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he is also the host of Shomer Saf, which is one of the top political podcasts in Israel. He is a noted public intellectual in Israel, and he's also the co-host of a podcast with me called Israel Update. But today, Gadi, you're joining us here at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. You're here as part of a colloquium. And what better timing? You're here the same week as...
Accidentally with the Prime Minister, yeah.
And the Prime Minister's here with Donald Trump, and so we're going to have a discussion about this, I think, actually historic meeting. Why don't we just start out? Let me just ask you, what are your top impressions from the meeting, and what's your sense of the current of opinion in Israel about it?
I think the Prime Minister was surprised by the extent to which it has gone. And so let me, before I try to assess or sum up public reactions, let's look at it historically. Historically, Zionist leaders were reluctant to get anywhere near the idea of transfer or expulsion.
You're talking about transfer of population from Gaza.
Yeah, and it's not clear that this is what we call transfer, because it's not clear that at least much of it is not going to be voluntary immigration, or at least that's what they're speaking about. But as early as the Peel Commission in 1937, you remember even the Peel Commission suggested population swaps. It was not expulsions. And even that was hard for Zionist leaders to accept. Eventually, Ben-Gurion, one of your favorite leaders, picture of Ben-Gurion with sunglasses in the back of the frame in all our podcasts, and Weizmann eventually got around to it, but they were very careful. And then came the War of Independence. And then there were, I think, what we eventually can, in retrospect, can call population swaps. Although it was some of it was expulsions on both sides. Jews were expelled from Arab countries. Within the war, although there was never a plan, research shows there was never a plan for ethnic cleansing of the area dedicated to the Jewish state. Nevertheless, as a result of a war, there were expulsions and also evacuations, voluntary evacuations.
Can I stop you there? Why was it an unacceptable idea in Zionism? Because if I think back to the 1930s, I mean, after the First World War, there were transfers of population, say between the Greeks and the Turks. There were the millions of people were transferred. After World War I in Europe, populations transferred. After World War II, populations transferred. Why would this be unacceptable in Zionism?
I think that already Zionist leaders already in the 1930s understood that this would be considered an original sin from which Zionism would find hard to cleanse. Mm. And indeed, in the 90s, where in Israel, post-colonial studies emerged, Benny Morris's big famous study, The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem.
Benny Morris, who was an historian at Ben Gurion University
But
in
first, I think
Beersheba.
he wrote his PhD, I think, in Oxford, and his PhD was about and though he changed his mind later, if you read his interviews then, and the thrust of his book was Israel was born in sin. This is what Zionist leaders...
Because of the expulsion of population, yeah.
So I think they understood early on that this would be that what superpowers can do, they can't. And maybe we're seeing a recap of that. What a superpower can do. You know, the jokes on Israeli Twitter is that the Supreme Court is going to outlaw Trump's plan because
the Israeli Supreme Court.
The Israeli Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Because if you take that position in Israel, you are barred from running to the Knesset. And so, you know, in the beginning of this war, Itamar Ben-Gvir said we should expel all the Arabs from Gaza, and the Prime Minister
Itamar Ben-Gvir, the head of Otzma Yehudit,
the
radical far-right politician.
And he was hushed, and the Prime Minister had to disown this plan, which he did. But suddenly it comes from the President of the United States, and that's a different thing. But I think that if you look at Netanyahu's reaction, part of his careful attitude stems from that perhaps he rejects it deeply, but at least outwardly, the Israeli public opinion is still, this is too hot a topic. And indeed, you see the press on the left sees this as the fact that so many Israelis were enthusiastic, sees that as a proof that we are morally bankrupt and deplorable.
I did a very quick look at the Israeli press, and I got an impressionistic sense of the responses, and so I got the sense that on the far right, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, there's complete embrace and excitement about it. In the, let's say, center left, and I'm talking about Benny Gantz, Lapid, and so on, the response seemed to be interesting, worthy of study, so very non-committal. They didn't want to. They basically sat on the fence and didn't want to take a position one way or another. And even Netanyahu's own statements were moved in that direction. It was very, very positive. This is an out-of-the-box suggestion. We need to work together with the president on it, and so on. But a little bit short of total embrace. Do I have that right, or do you think I'm?
I think you do. And what is missing is the whole of the left, which is, look, the moral map by which the left has read the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is collapsing. It has been collapsing since October 7. And you see them trying to salvage something from it, because the left, for a very long time, read the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as Israel's fault. The reason we don't have peace is Israel's fault. And that worldview was so deeply entrenched that the fact that the Palestinians always rejected peace did not register. So they invented, I was interviewed for this, the Israeli PBS, the Israeli public television, publicly financed television, is very lefty. And
is it paid for by USAID?
I don't know, but it certainly can be paid by USAID. They did a documentary series called the Tribal Fires. It's not, we no longer have one tribal fire around which to gather, but different fires. You see, it's multiculturalism. And I had them take all my interview out after I realized what they were doing. Because what they said, that their telling of the story is like this. Once there was a hero, Rabin, and he reached out to Arafat, the other hero. But then came Baruch Goldstein, and this was an Israeli terrorist who walked into the tomb of the fathers and shot from the back praying Muslims. He was an American-born doctor from a settlement. And after that, the Palestinians retaliated with terror. That's a wrong way to tell the story because terrorism began on the Palestinian side. There were terrorists before Baruch Goldstein, and Arafat renounced the Oslo Accords before Baruch Goldstein, but that's how they tell the story. So after Baruch Goldstein, there were all these terror attacks, and then they framed this episode as the enemies of peace on both sides. Whenever you say the enemies of peace on both sides, you imply that there are also friends of peace on both sides, but there were only friends of peace on our side. There's never a peace movement on the other side. And then the right murdered Rabin, and that killed peace. And then they have to connect Netanyahu to Yigal Amir. Yigal Amir actually pulled the trigger and killed Rabin. No connection to Netanyahu, but Netanyahu incited, they say. Those who are honest know that Netanyahu not only did not incite, but he actually stood. Whenever crowds for his election campaign started shouting Rabin is a traitor, he stopped them. He said, adversary, political adversary. We are brothers. We are one people. He's not an enemy. And so, but they had to blame Netanyahu for it. Why, Mike? Because if it's our fault, then it's fixable. Then you can rescue the narrative. Right. If it's not our fault, there's nothing to do. And then came October 7.
Not just rescue the narrative, but you can actually build peace.
And
if we are, it's you. I'm not Jewish, so I don't have to take responsibility.
Seriously?
Yeah, actually.
We really thought you were a diaspora Jew.
No, I'm not.
One of our commentators on our podcast.
I just have left-wing, naive, diaspora Jew attitudes.
Yeah.
But if we're the cause of conflict, then if we can repair what's wrong with us, then we can solve the conflict.
Yeah. And then came October 7. It became even harder to salvage the narrative. And then came Donald Trump with this. You have to give him credit for one thing. He completely dismantled the whole framework in which we were all trapped. And now, I don't know whether this will happen. I'll ask you if you think, as an expert in the Middle East, outside the Israeli perspective, how feasible you think the plan is, because that's all everybody's talking about. But it's an important fact that he just completely broke the paradigm, and with different terms. And you have to give it to him that it's not for the first time, because if you look at his original peace plan, I thought the deal of the century, it was called, the fact that idiotically the Israeli right rejected it was because, when it came out, I thought, this is brilliant. This is annexation, or we don't say annexation, extension of sovereignty, because it's not annexed from anyone. So extension of sovereignty to the Jordan Valley, which means a physical barrier between us and the whole Arab world. And here you have annexation, and it's called a peace plan. And it did contain a Palestinian state on 70% of the territories, which is less than other offers. But it's another example where Trump, that doesn't get enough credit, I think, came to this, looked at the whole process and said, every time the Palestinians say no, you rush back and try to get a better offer that will please them. And that's not how you conduct negotiations. You conduct negotiations the other way around. Every time you reject, next you get a worse offer. But the Israelis couldn't stand the term Palestinian state. The settlers rebelled against it. The settlers have a messianic vision of redemption, and they have real estate operations and no politics in the middle.
Yeah.
There's theology and real estate and nothing in between. And so whenever you put the idea of a Palestinian state, and they just went berserk, and that collapsed. But Trump shattered the paradigms, and now he's doing it again. And whatever happens, I doubt that we can reestablish the same paradigm, and the left is screaming so loudly because their whole their narrative is a moral tale. And if we are allowed to have an immoral ending to the tale, then their whole Hollywood movie is just thrashed. It's like the white guy was good in the end, or something, or the smoker is not the killer.
The end of their movie is a two-state solution. Is that it? And a two-state solution. The end of the left's movie that they have in their head is a two-state solution based on the 67 lines, and the complete destruction of the Israeli right as a result, because the Israeli right is basically based on the idea of settling all of the land, of settling of Yudav and Shomron, right?
Yeah, yeah. A friend of ours, I'll call him Aleph Shin, he's a very funny guy, and an Israeli friend. You'll start thinking about it.
I'm working on it. Go ahead.
He sends you memes all the time. He said that the left's dream is a dream of coexistence with the Palestinians, and therefore maybe the left should go along with them and have coexistence somewhere else where they're relocated.
You asked me for my view on the feasibility of this project. I will answer it, but let me first react to what you said about the original Trump plan, the deal of the century. I also thought it was brilliant, and I spent a year before it came out, I wouldn't say railing against it, but telling people that this isn't going to go anywhere. It's not. This project is not worth the effort being put into it. But I was really surprised with what came out. It was very creative, regardless of whether you like this aspect or that aspect. It was produced. It was a very serious document. A lot of thought went into it, and it started from very different assumptions than everyone usually starts from.
It was Jason Greenblatt, right, who led it?
Jason Greenblatt, but also Jared Kushner. I think Jared Kushner deserves a lot of credit for it. And it had what I think are the essential. I look at this from an American point of view, and I think there are two things that are crucial to any plan if it's going to serve the American interest. One is Israeli control. Permanent control, which basically means sovereignty, but permanent control over the Jordan Valley. The Jordan Valley has to be the security border of the state of Israel. And the second thing is that the Palestinian state has to be demilitarized. You can't have, for example, Iran capable of reaching into the Palestinian state and delivering weaponry to it, like we have we can't have another Hezbollah or Hamas on the West Bank. That's not in the interest of the United States.
Yeah.
So
we do, by the way.
You do.
Iran is arming.
Iran is trying to do that now. Yeah. But it hasn't succeeded like it succeeded in Gaza and Lebanon.
It depends how you measure success, because the Palestinian police or security services has become an army. It has become an army. They're sending their people to Pakistan to train in armor, to train in aviation. Yeah. That's not a police force.
That's not a police force, right. So it has to be demilitarized.
Who are they going to invade? Jordan?
Yeah, it has to be demilitarized.
Yeah.
It has to be. That has to be monitored very carefully. With respect to this plan right now, I think it's easy to poke holes in. There's a lot of, in the sense that there's a lot of that goes unexplained. Who's going to go in? If we're going to, clearly, Hamas is going to fight this tooth and nail.
Yeah.
This takes us back to a debate that you and I had, I think maybe in our last podcast, where I said someone has to go in and begin taking apart Hamas as a governing institution.
Yeah, that was the part we agreed on.
That has to happen.
Do you think that could be the United States?
The United States will not do that.
Yeah, because
this is the problem. So how do you we have the United States taking an ownership position, that's a direct quote from Donald Trump, and developing developing Gaza economically. But how do you get to the point where Hamas is destroyed as a governing institution? Because it can prevent Palestinians, if there's a mechanism set up to begin to have voluntary departure from Gaza.
Open the gates.
Open the gates. How do you open the gates as long as Hamas is still there? So someone has to take it apart, and so
it will be the IDF.
So yeah, it'll have to be the IDF. But
because as I learned from you in many conversations, what both parties in the United States share is that they both don't want American boots on the ground.
Right.
Donald Trump said that he wants to be remembered as a peacemaker. The last time an American president said that, it was 2013, I think, Woodrow Wilson. So
1913 again.
1913, yeah. Sorry. And that, if that's a signal, then he doesn't want to send the armies.
Yeah.
He did say so, right? He was asked, "Is the American army going to go in?"
What I saw was that the White House officials started walking back some of his statements.
The White House official, because I saw Waltz,
yes,
and Rubio,
and the White House spokeswoman Leavitt as well. So they.
What did she say?
I'm getting them mixed up in my head. I don't want to misquote, but they moved away from a concrete plan to a kind of vision framework. Yeah.
So do you think that's on the president's order?
I have no idea. I would assume that he was okay with it, because it would be a very dangerous thing to do to Donald Trump when he's at the height of his power. Start putting words in his mouth that he didn't want to say.
Yeah, and maybe he there's. I'm not a student of Donald Trump's character, but he does do this often. Throws a firebomb, and then behind the smoke does something much more moderate. And I think it's a I think you could say it's a tactic. It's not, because his enemies say he's irresponsible, he gets carried away, and then he's in trouble. And I don't think that's what happens. I think he shocks you, and then after the shock, things begin to move, and then something else settles. But the question is, Mike.
He does that a lot. Yeah, I'm gonna build a wall and make Mexico pay for it.
Yeah. But then he's serious about building a wall.
I think he's serious about this. I don't think this is I saw I can't remember, one of our favorite columnists in the Israeli press, Nahum Barnea, or I don't know, someone was saying that this is just a negotiating principle. It's the goat that you stick in the thing that you stick into your demands in order to negotiate it away. I don't think so. This is actually I think the president thinking about this and dealing with it's him dealing with the very obvious, with the fact that should be obvious to everyone, but no one wants to admit, that there is no two-state solution, and that Gaza, as it exists right now with Hamas in control, is absolutely ungovernable, and you can't. There's no way to settle the situation in a way that is that guards Israel's security and that has minimal consideration for the humanitarian situation in Gaza,
I think,
without destroying Hamas and creating a completely new reality in the Strip.
So I think it goes further than that. It's not just that he trashed the two-state solution. The idea that there are two peoples was now dissolved. Because he didn't speak about a people, he spoke about people. There are people in distress. We'll settle them somewhere else. They'll have a better life. And this is why our acquaintance and friend Lee Smith wrote that that the Donald Trump plan is, he was more forceful about it, I'll say it more carefully, is possibly the end of a lie. And the lie, he says, is the Palestinian national movement. Because the Palestinian national movement was built on negativity. There was never nation building. There is only the principle of annihilating our national movement. And also, if you look at their political culture, and that's like a micro thing. It's not a macro thing. If you look at their political behavior, it's a combination of terrorism and gangsterism. It's completely corrupt, and they're corrosive of sovereignty wherever they go. If you look at them in Palestine, if you look at them in Jordan, where the king had to basically mass murder people in refugee camps and drive Arafat and his gang out. And then you look in Lebanon, and they did the same thing.
I wouldn't call that mass murder. I'd make a distinction.
15,000 people.
I'd make a distinction between the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Palestinians.
But according to their numbers, around 15,000 people were killed in just shelling of the refugee camps. So it was brutal. This was why, by the way, Rabin, this is a side people don't like to admit of the Oslo process. Rabin kept saying, "Bli Bagatz v'bli B'Tselem." Without the Supreme Court and without B'Tselem, the Oslo.
We have to tell the audience what.
So please explain. You are the mediator between cultures.
Yeah, but B'Tselem is a left-wing NGO that
tends to be dealing in human rights and actually
that is strongly opposed to the settlement of the Judea and Samaria, and works closely with international actors who are hostile to Israel to put pressure on Israel.
And Bagatz is the Supreme Court, and also the guardian of human rights. And so Rabin, Rabin in the War of Independence was no softy. And when the Intifada began, he said, break their bones. So Rabin was frustrated by the fact that he can't suppress Palestinian violence with Israeli violence, because he has B'Tselem shouting human rights and the Supreme Court forbidding him to do this.
B'Tselem organizing international actors and the Supreme Court putting restrictions on what he's allowed to do domestically.
Exactly. And so he said, if we delegate this to the Palestinian Authority, they'll crush Hamas without human rights bullshit, as he would have it. And so what we did is we outsourced our security, thinking that the Palestinian Authority has an interest of suppressing Hamas, but the Palestinian Authority and Hamas is the same. And this is why I think, Mike, that what Donald Trump is suggesting about Gaza, already on the right, Mike Huckabee, by the way, said the same solution for Judea and Samaria. because people are.
I missed that. When did he say that?
He said maybe we should also consider resettling the Palestinians of Judea and Samaria, because the whole the Biden administration, the Israeli left, what we call the peace camp, all the NGOs and all the rest of the peace processor network, they are all trying to create a dichotomy between bad Hamas and good Palestinian Authority. But if you look at from which textbooks did the Hamas terrorists who slaughtered babies, which textbooks did they grow up on? They grew up in UNRWA schools with Palestinian Authority textbooks, in which I think I said on our show a few times, when they teach you grammar, their examples are all murderous. They take, a 7-year-old child, and the sentence that he has to put the diacritics, you call them?
Diacritical marks.
Diacritical marks in Arabic, there are many of them, is the occupier, it is forbidden to think of the occupiers as human. That's an actual quote. And this is a grammar book. And when you go to physics, then the question is, imagine a funeral of a shaheed. The shaheed's body weighs...
Martyr.
80, martyr. I learned to pronounce the word. It weighs 80 kilos. And how many men do you need to carry the coffin if blah, blah, blah. So all the examples are like that. It's total brainwash from day one on both sides. And now Israel is going into the places like Jenin and other places in the territories. And there are tunnels, and there's infrastructure, and there's heavy weaponry. And the fact that Yahya Sinwar probably jumped the gun, although there is now evidence that Iran, I don't know if you saw this, I don't know, and I don't know how reliable it is. Baruch Yadid, who was the Arab correspondent for Channel 14.
I did not see this.
He's very good. And now he was bought by I-24, said that Yahya Sinwar went to Iran before October 7 and presented the plan, and Iran decided not to pass this along to Hezbollah. So I don't know from that if it's clear. It's not clear from that if Iran vetoed the plan and did not tell Hezbollah, or else Iran said that's your business.
I didn't see that. That's amazing.
I think it's on my Twitter feed.
It's
follow my Twitter feed. It's very good, actually.
What's your name?
I'll write it down. For you.
Thank you. If it's true, it's an amazing intelligence failure.
From Israel, for Israel.
Yeah, for the United States as well. I mean, if he can leave Gaza, go through Egypt, get out, go to Iran, come back undetected in Iran, undetected in Egypt. Where else? What other countries did he go through?
Since it was very succinct, I can't vouch for the fact that it was Yahya Sinwar himself and not a messenger. But it may have been, and that's a failure too. And this is Iran is Mossad. Gaza is Shabak.
Meaning that the Mossad has responsibility for monitoring what goes on in Iran, and the Shin Bet, which is what the General Security Services, is what we call the Israeli FBI, the FBI equivalent.
The counter-terror
has responsibility for Gaza.
But you know, this is itself an anomaly, because originally Mossad was
the United States should also have be monitoring such things.
It's like an overlap between CIA and FBI, because originally the Shin Bet was supposed to monitor internally, domestically, and Mossad internationally. But the Palestinians, the branch of the security service that dealt with Palestinians, when Gaza was still part of the territory that we ruled, it was not part of Israel proper, then Shabak had control of it, and then it became a foreign place, and Shabak stayed, and Shabak was part of the Conceptia. Shabak disregarded human intelligence. That means they stopped, they de-emphasized human sources, and they were obsessed with cyber. We're so good at cyber. And you see that... Shabak. And you see that for a year and a half.
It's amazing because their adversary was Mad Max. Was Mad Max. It's amazing that they would move to think that cyber could solve their problems for them. Especially when historically, one of the things that has made Israeli intelligence superior to American intelligence, or one of the areas in which it has distinguished itself in comparison to American intelligence, has been in human intelligence. We actually are not particularly good at human intelligence. But we're good in the sense that we're the center of the Western world, and we absorb information from
everybody,
including from you. So
whether we like it or not.
Whether you like it or not. So we have, but we in a sense, we have an incredible human intelligence network. It's just not our own. But when we try to do with on our own human intelligence, we don't do it.
But you see the difference between Mossad, which had, they had Hezbollah. They knew when anyone sneezed in Hezbollah. and the beeper operation, and the bombing exactly when Nasrallah was there, and all the other deputies, they basically destroyed the whole command structure of Hamas, and then neutralized the missile threat,
and they have a
which
number,
no one, including us, didn't think they could do.
And they have a number of, a string of remarkable successes in Iran, including
stealing the
archive. Yeah.
And look at Shabak, who for a year and a half almost cannot find 200 hostages. This is outrageous. Gaza is this small thing. We can surround Gaza completely, and we can divide it into sections. And this is also the failure of the IDF, which is colossal. The IDF has not managed to win the war in almost a year and a half, while Mossad acted like, Mission Impossible. It's like, it looks like, I remember us, Mike, on our podcast, after these things, just scratching our heads, how the hell did they do it? And that was also important in terms of morale, because we felt beaten by not just a band of terrorists, but also if you look at the footage of the Gazans crossing the border fence, first came the terrorists on their Toyotas, but then came people on crutches and teenagers on bicycles. And kids participated in burning families alive. This was like a mass picnic for the people on the other side of the fence. And we were totally helpless against this. And I don't know if you remember, there was a tank officer. It's worth remarking on, because I don't think that outside Israel anybody is aware of this argument. The left is insisting on a commission of inquiry called Mamlachtit, statist or State Commission of Inquiry. And the right is completely against it. Because according to the law that sets up these kind of committees, they are set up by the Supreme Court. And many Israelis feel that the Supreme Court and its auxiliaries in the other branches of government were a serious part of the problem. And on the morning of October 7th, there was a tank standing where one of the places the fence was breached. And the commander of the tank told his crew not to shoot because people were unarmed.
Right.
So we let a mass of murderers cross the fence, but these people are trained to obey a judicial commissar.
Rules of engagement that are set by the Supreme Court.
Rules of engagement that are good for demonstrations domestically, not for fighting an adversary.
Right.
The adversary was very smart about eroding them. And here, these people went to murder families in kibbutz. And here is this guy in a tank, with all the equipment of a modern Merkava Siman Shalosh tank, which is very modern and powerful. And he just lets these people pass like tourists. It's, can you get into the, oh, you can. But you can't.
What were you going to say? Can I get?
I was going to say you can't get into the United States like that, but obviously that's no longer true.
Well, it's getting harder.
It's getting harder now. but a border police at the JFK is 70 times stricter than this guy in a tank with an enemy crossing the border.
Let's go back to the Trump-Netanyahu meeting. So how do you imagine? We covered a little bit the reactions in Israel. What do you imagine is going through Prime Minister Netanyahu's mind right now?
Ooh.
About the Trump's Gaza plan? Is it what he wanted when he came here?
I don't think so.
We titled this episode here with you. We titled it "Are Trump and Netanyahu on the same page?"
Yeah, I think Netanyahu was surprised, and I think that even if he was not, this is something that an Israeli prime minister, for the reasons with which we started this discussion, a prime minister in Israel has to at least show himself to be, if not forced, then seduced into this, rather than him pushing it. So while Netanyahu could hint
Because because it has been a taboo in Israeli politics forever.
Yeah.
Even before,
yeah.
even in pre-state politics, it was a taboo.
Also, if you want to implement this, is it wise to say so? Is it wise to say so or just begin doing it without declarations? We're all traumatized on the Israeli right by the failure of judicial reform.
Yeah.
And what everybody says is instead of what Yariv Levin did when he initiated the reform was make a grand declaration that he's going to change the system. Instead of moving one piece at a time and create, and therefore he created this wave of resistance. Are we not going now, and this is it's a question for you more than for me, are we not going, look, Jordan has already announced that over its dead body. The Saudis said that they will not go for normalization unless there is a Palestinian state. Now, saying Palestinian state means rejecting Trump's plan completely.
Right. That's also a hardening of their position, because they used to say unless there is a movement on the Palestinian issue, and then it was an irreversible pathway to a Palestinian state.
That was the American suggestion.
And now they're saying Palestinian state.
So exactly my point is declaring this, Trump's shock tactic, is that not giving the opposition and adversaries a chance to organize, or maybe in the case of the Saudis, just pushing them to a situation in which they can't not resist?
It won't just be them. There'll be an international coalition against this will develop.
Especially in the Arab world, because remember that...
In Europe as well. There'll be the Irish, the Spaniards. They will, all of those who were moving toward a Palestinian state prior to...
Yeah, they have to give up their long-cherished dream, but with the Arabs it's worse, because the Palestinian refugee problem, and UNRWA, by the way, were created in order to perpetuate the problem, in order to use it against Israel. So now what Trump is basically saying is you lost your best leverage against Israel, the one that's causing all of Israel's trouble in the UN and everywhere else, in the Security Council, in the European Union and elsewhere. This is going to disappear. What are they going to do if we are no longer can be portrayed as occupiers?
What a lot of people in the Israeli press said was that, after expressing great doubts about it, they would say, well, at least this will force the other side, meaning the Arab side, to come up with an alternative solution. So in other words, Trump has moved the Overton window on what are possible solutions, and he's forcing people to think of solutions other than just the two-state solution, which the mantra that people have been repeating since Oslo, and which has produced nothing but violence.
Yeah, I think he definitely changed the whole conceptual framework, and as I said, one of the most important things that he did is defy the idea that has been wrong, that the Palestinian national movement is something like we imagine national liberation movements.
Right.
So even if you later go back to acknowledging the Palestinian people or the Palestinian peoplehood, the whole misconception of the two-state solution is imagining their national movement in the image of ours. Since we wanted, above all, political independence, we assume that they want, above all, political independence, and they don't.
And that giving them political independence will lead to greater stability in the region. That this is the absence of their political independence is the issue that makes the Middle East, or at least a big chunk of it, unstable and prone to violence.
There is a piece by Nehemiah Stressler, the free marketeer, dovish commentator in Haaretz, which in August 2005, this is Disengagement, said the best proof against Netanyahu's fear-mongering is that Gaza will turn into, he didn't use Singapore, something else, the oasis of the Middle East, because now everyone will discover that the Palestinians too will want to do business. And selling hummus is so much better than making war. And now everyone will see that the Israelis prefer to go to Gaza to eat cheap fish than to fight. And so, this whole paradigm that, did I quote on our show my friend, Professor Kobi Michael, who said they think that in every Palestinian terrorist there is a little Jefferson crying to be let out. Or they think that we are all Western individuals they think Francis Fukuyama.
Let's go back to Netanyahu. So,
is this a psychological question about Netanyahu?
yeah, no.
Or a mind-reading one?
Yeah, no. I'm asking you as a very well-informed Israeli analyst who's in touch. You're very familiar with ideas on the left because you came from the left. You're also aware of ideas on the right, and you have a very good understanding of the personality and the political inclinations of the prime minister. So I'm just asking you to put yourself in his shoes and say, how do you imagine he is processing this? So he didn't come with the expectation that this is what he was going to get on Gaza.
I think that's a hypothesis.
But we know nobody knows for sure. So, but just on the basis of what we know, it sure seems like this was unexpected. It drops in his lap. There are elements of it that are dangerous to him. There are elements that are very attractive. Let me put it to you this way: how does he come away when he gets on the plane on Saturday night and flies back to Israel? Does he say to himself, "This was a win" or "This was a loss"?
I think that on balance, a win, but I think that his frame of mind, he's a very cautious person and a pessimist. So he is not inclined to be swept away by grand visions. So he may think that this is so over the top and so far that it will hamper our ability to go the first half of the way. Because I thought, he immediately said, I guess, after we had the Philadelphia corridor, when it began to seem that we would win this thing, and that was not at all clear in the beginning, he made clear that there will be no settlement, no reestablishment of Jewish settlements in Gaza. He also did not say that we will annex the north third of the Gaza Strip. So he was not on the radical right side. Now you don't know. He had Biden on his head. So you don't know if this is his actual position or that's what he says to be careful. But
every position is contextual anyway. And Biden's opposition is part of the context. Anyway, go ahead.
But I think that his inclination would be incremental and not revolutionary, and that this is revolutionary. So,
but if I can just take one step back. First of all, if when he's going on the plane back and he thinks about it, he thinks, okay, number one, it's nice not to have Biden on his head anymore, right?
That's
so
for sure.
A lot of the restrictions that Trump has released, a lot of the restrictions that removed a lot of the restrictions that Biden had put on the Israelis, including supply of arms. So the Israelis have a freer hand in Gaza now, from a military point of view. They have a freer hand. There is, of course, the deal they're locked into.
Yeah.
Which I think I suspect is part of the reason why Trump announced this and announced it so grandly. I think that Trump realized that the hostage deal, and I don't know this for a fact, this is my supposition. Trump supported Biden's hostage deal. It disappointed a lot of people in Israel. It disappointed a lot of his own followers here. And he got an earful from people close to him that he and his envoy, Witkoff, had gone too far. toward Hamas, and they had given a lifeline to Hamas through this deal. And I think he announced this grand plan for Gaza in order to redress the balance and show that no, I'm not trying to keep Hamas alive. I actually have a plan to get the hostages home and then to destroy Hamas completely and to eliminate it. So as a domestic political move, it's quite.
It makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
But the deal and the vision are on a collision course. They cannot both. Accepting this framework means that the second phase of the deal is out.
Right, because the second phase of the deal, because Hamas is going to dig in against it, is what you're saying, right?
Because if you want to expel everyone or empty the Gaza Strip from not just Hamas but also the population, then what is the Hamas end game with the hostage deal? It's trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
If we'll have no people, then
So if you're Netanyahu on the plane going back, that's another tick in favor of the Trump plan.
But here's
because this deal, if carried to its end
means
state,
no victory.
Means no victory. Hamas stays in power, and Israel's out of the Gaza Strip entirely. Right?
Yeah, and the whole left is the press and the permanent anti-Bibi protesters were all working on not letting Netanyahu retract the second part of the.
And Trump
just trashed this completely. And remember, they all relied on the Biden administration for their anti-Netanyahu campaign. But here's another point.
So this really discombobulates the left, actually, much more than it's discombobulated.
They are hysterical. Actually, I don't remember enjoying reading Haaretz like I did in the last 2 days. I'm just sitting there smiling, reading they're fuming.
Are you telling me you subscribe to Haaretz?
Who would monitor them, Mike? This is open source intelligence for me. But here's another
I would
angle.
expect you to at least steal the subscription from somebody else and not put money in their pocket.
No, can I tell this story? I'll tell you. Someone from the subscription department called me and said, you have a digital subscription to Haaretz. Do you want our weekend print edition for this and this reduced sum? And I said, I'm not going to give Shoken even one penny more than I absolutely have to. And there was a pause. And then she said, I was sorry when they closed your column.
Everyone in the audience may not realize that you had a column in Haaretz and
they shut it down because I was the opposition.
And Shokin, the publisher, attacks you personally on Twitter.
Yeah, like a stalker. He said, Taub's opinions are illegitimate and should not be heard. That's about judicial reform. My opinions were half the country. So half the country is illegitimate and should not be heard.
By the way, this got nothing to do with anything, but I went to college with a guy, and years later, I called up my bank to try to, do something with my account, and I recognized his voice. That was a very surprising thing.
There's one angle that we haven't touched on that I wanted to mention, because my reaction, when Trump said we will own it, and then you put on your Twitter feed the two-state solution, right? The USA and Gaza, little Gaza, and huge Israel. And my first reaction is, do we want a 51st state in the land of Israel on our border? Now, there's advantages to that. For instance, a war with Egypt will be harder. Egypt is arming, and it's not because it's planning war with Ethiopia. I don't know when or what, but they are arming with American money, by the way. And having a little New Jersey on our Gaza shore may be a good buffer. But then, think of it like this. When Putin went into Syria, we had a complicated arrangement of who we can attack and what. But this was scary. Suddenly you have the big Russian bear right on your border, and there can be friction. And you don't know what the international situation, how it would change. You don't want this huge thing sitting at your doorstep. Now, that's a sinister power. The United States is mostly, not with every administration, a benign power.
If I were an Israeli, I wouldn't be happy with it at all. Because first of all, it's part of what you can see as a pattern. The pattern begins with what happened in Syria. The Israeli Air Force and Special Forces hollowed out Hezbollah and thereby weakened the Assad regime, which was reliant on Iran and Hezbollah for its support. And then the Turks came in and took all of the winnings off the table. Or maybe a jungle metaphor is better. Israel killed the lion, but then the jackals came and took the carcass away, right? So the lion kills the deer, and the jackals come and take it away. And this is because Israel doesn't have a ground game. And the same thing has happened here. Israel did all the hard work of destroying Hamas militarily, and then the United States comes in as the jackal and takes it. This is no power in the world wants to be in a situation where its military victories are
subsumed
by other powers.
But it's worse than that. It's worse because my fear is not. This is almost a matter of ego or honor. My fear is that something like American sovereignty, so close to home, is dangerous because it's so big. Because American administrations change, and America has various complicated interests all over the world. Now, what happens if you have the American, I don't know, even army, sitting right inside your country, and then your country is in the way of something? This is
or just look at the Obama and Biden foreign policy.
There you go.
They were not a benign. I don't think that the attitude of the benign force.
I agree, but
so you don't want to have your most serious. Your Israel. We discovered one of the things we discovered about since October 7th. Is that Israel is dangerously dependent on the United States.
But what I'm saying is even more abstract, I think, Mike, is that the difference in size makes it an uncomfortable partnership.
Right.
It's you're hugging it's like Earth and the sun, you know? It's not at one point this huge ball can run you over,
right.
And you don't know for what reason or where. And also, if I may bring up a metaphor used by our friend, our mutual acquaintance, Tony Badon, which keeps going back to King Herod. King Herod.
You know what is Badran in Hebrew?
Oh, you say that to Tony. He has, for those of you who don't know, Badran is entertainer, and Tony keeps saying, if one more guy,
comedian,
one more Israeli says that to me, do you know what your name means? So anyway, what Tony said, and I borrowed that in the piece about guns later. I call him the Herodian candidate after the Manchurian candidate. I'm not sure who understood. But the idea is that King Herod the Great won in his power struggle with the other faction, Antigonus, by harnessing Roman power. And the Roman Empire, and he was very intimate with the Roman, with Augustus's family. He maneuvered very smartly between Antonius and Augustus. But eventually he became a welcome guest in Rome, and he ruled courtesy of Rome. And what happened is that later Rome subsumed Judea as a province and then destroyed it and expelled the Jews for 2,000 years out of our homeland. So this is also part of the fear. The way first Tony talked about it, and then I talked about it, is that, and we talked about it, the Americans were trying to use guns in order to topple Netanyahu, and how stupid was, what a big misunderstanding this was. But it can come in a different guise.
Right.
And now Trump can hug Bibi too tightly. And that also can be dangerous.
You know, we've only got about 2 minutes left. I want to.
How do you know that?
There's a clock up there on the wall.
There is.
Yeah.
There isn't one there. Oh, I can see it reflecting through the window.
Yeah. So I just want to. We don't have time to talk about.
Maybe you have questions from the audience, though.
I don't think we have time. What should we allow a question from the audience? There's a actually let me put 2 points and then we'll go to the questions from the audience.
If you
the
can
2 points
bring the
are
microphone
there was more than just Gaza, and there was also Iran discussed. And I thought that Trump is clearly going for a negotiation with Iran. And I think as Netanyahu is going back in the plane, I think the Iran policy is going to be something of a disappointment. And secondly, from my point of view, I don't think there was any discussion. I saw no sign that there was any discussion of Syria and Turkey, and I think that was really unfortunate. But that's a whole nother discussion. Yes.
Hello, thank you very much for joining us today. I have a question more on normalization, on Saudi normalization, because Trump said that it's going to happen. Bibi reiterated and said, yes, it's going to happen. But right after the announcement of the Gaza plan, there was a Saudi statement basically saying that there is no normalization without a Palestinian state. And I was wondering what were your opinions about that?
That's a great question, actually. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think the grand way in which Trump announced the plan created an uncomfortable situation for the Saudis. And that you have to start telling apart. The Arab leaders feel an obligation for the cause célèbre of Arab nationalism all over is you have to support the Palestinians. Now, when peace erupted with the United Emirates, the people in the United Emirates, I mean, not the workers, the whole class of workers, but the actual Emiratis, where they would open travel agencies and say, go to Israel with a picture of Al-Aqsa. And you think, they are sick of the Palestinians. And there are many Arabs who are now sick of having to support the Palestinians automatically despite their recalcitrance. Because the Saudis are worried, Mike, like you, about Iran. And what they would really like is an effective coalition against Iran. And the rest of the deal and
I think the population also has affinity for the Palestinians, and so they see all the suffering. I don't think it's for nothing that the Saudi position hardened on this Palestinian state question over
because it's a symbolic issue, I think. Because it's a symbolic issue. But I think
symbolic and humanitarian.
But if you look at the interest, and I think this is what Trump may be building on. The interests are a coalition against Iran.
Sure, but it's hard. It's very hard. I don't disagree with that at all. But it's very hard for an Arab leader to have an American president meet with an Israeli
and tell them,
and then say, "This is what you're going to do." That's simply not going to happen like that. There's no way. Maybe we have time for one more question. Can we give the microphone to the lady in pink over here?
The question is, do you think that interests will be powerful enough to overwhelm the symbolic issue? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you both so much. This was very interesting. I'm wondering what role you think the PA is going to play in the upcoming plan. Is this going to legitimize them more? Are they going to play a part in the political reconstruction of Gaza?
I hope that this ruled out the idea that the Biden administration had that the Palestinian Authority would overtake Gaza. I think we need to backtrack to what happened, the history of these ideas, And Netanyahu's view after disengagement for Gaza was a fact. And then Hamas took over. And then Netanyahu maintained the division between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, because that was his way to prevent any attempt to force Israel back into a two-state solution, because you can't have a three-state solution, although some people do think it. But as long as they are divided, it saves you the bother of saying that you're resisting the two-state track. The Biden administration and the Israeli left thought that they could leverage October 7 into weakening Hamas, bringing back the Palestinian Authority, have a united Palestinian leadership again, and return it to the two-state solution or track. This was always a pipe dream. There is no way that the Palestinian Authority can take over Gaza. It's too weak, it's too corrupt, it can't control Hamas in its own territory. Never mind Gaza. And so I think the whole idea was a pipe dream. And also, as I said earlier, the Palestinian Authority is no better than Hamas. It's just a different tactic. It's no better. For the Palestinian Authority, people don't know this outside Israel. The people in the Palestinian security apparatuses there was a report issued, I think, a year ago by Regavim movement, which was called Policemen by Day, Terrorists by Night. Policemen or security forces personnel are moonlighting as terrorists, and then the spokespersons for the PA brag that they kill more Jews in Judea and Samaria than Hamas does. So there is no prospect there. I think that Israel will have to dismantle the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria too, and take more direct control there, because we're now discovering that under our noses, they're building a Hamastan as they did in Gaza. On that happy note, you were going to say.
I'm going to add one sentence, and then we have to say.
You always want the last word, Mike.
I want the last word. I'm just going to say that the Palestinian Authority will just stay as far away from this as it possibly can. And with that, I do have to bring it to an end. Thank you for this. It's been a very fascinating conversation. And thanks for all that you've done to make the last few days a success here.